Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to continue with the coverage of the first tournament of our Discord. In this case, we're going to be talking about the games that happened right before the finals. And I faced Tucker Josie, Eli, for the first time in the tournament in the winner's bracket. And this position came about. It was my turn to miss some tactics. Apparently, B4 here wins right away. Obviously, the threat is to fork these two pieces. And the engine even thinks that the best thing to do is to allow the fork to happen. But even if that weren't the case, at least you're winning a pawn. So yeah, that would have worked. In this position, I was running low on time. I was perfectly aware that the position wasn't bad for me, that I had a very decent position. But since I was so low on time, I just panicked and played a random move. And the random move was this check, which doesn't do anything. And I knew, that it didn't do anything right away, but but I just wanted the increment of the 5 seconds. The problem is that not only doesn't it do anything, but also it loses. So after coming back here, which is the right thing to do, then apparently b5 is winning because of course this pawn is pinned. And it continues to be pinned even after you move the queen because it's pinned to 2 pieces. So that was unfortunate there. Fortunately, it didn't get played. Instead, Tucker played here this check, and then the position was equal. In this position, I blundered again by going here. Then there was queen a3 check and all sorts of tricks with the fact that these pawns are waiting for my king over there, and then the heavy pieces are on the other side, so I'm losing. However, Tucker went here, and therefore I wasn't lost anymore. After this trade, this was his mistake. Here, I was sure I was winning this endgame because I have these two connected passed pawns over here, whereas even though we have the same amount of pawns, he has double pawns and they are on this side of the board, and also they are cutting the king. This king can't activate as easily as mine. My king is very active already. So this pawn endgame was fairly easy to play. And that's how I won that game. It was a tough game. Our second game, Tucker missed my point here and played this move g3. Knight d4 took place, and then it was just over. The second match of round 3, we have Codeman versus Bromac Moment. They were number 2 and 3 seeds in the tournament. Now, this position came about on their first game, and here Bromac Moment can simply just win a pawn by taking here twice. Instead of that, they played over here, and Black should have just taken this pawn probably so that they are not down a pawn. Instead, they played here, allowing this again, but it wasn't done by white. White played here. Now here retreating the bishop to d6 would have been fine, but instead of that, they played a very weird move. Queen d6. I don't know what they were thinking here, but yeah, just taking the free bishop is completely winning for white. They hit the queen first before they took the bishop, then proceeded to take the bishop, and the win from there was fairly straightforward. So in their second game, this position happened. Codeman had white and he played g5. Now moving the knight would have been fine, but instead they tried some weird tactic here with knight e4, but this doesn't work. Just taking with the bishop is perfectly fine. According to the engine, taking with the knight here would be a blunder. I mean, you wouldn't lose the game, but black would be better. After taking here with a pawn, your queen no longer guards this, so you have to actually retreat the bishop, and this pushing of white's pieces ends up being in black favor somehow. However, bishop takes knight was played in the game. That's the right way to capture. Now this is protected twice. and here white was completely winning. Later in the game, Codeman missed his opponent's idea. The idea is going rook c4 and trying to go for a ladder mate. However, it doesn't work if you play something like rook g1 and trade these rooks, or play either rook to e1 in order to meet the other rook on e4. The idea was missed by Codeman, who played knight b5, a one-move attack on this pawn presumably, and after rook c4, f4, stopping the rook on its tracks. Then black should have gone for rook c2, trying to get some counterplay in the second rank, and instead of that, they just pushed the pawn over here, and after a trade of rooks, Codeman has simply killed all of black's counterplay. Later, however, Codeman threw away the win by playing knight d4, a one-move attack on the rook, and after rook e3 check, Brobmak Moment was getting the knight. However, if Codeman had played king f2 here, it would have been a draw, but they went the other way, which means that after rook takes knight, the rook is cutting off white's king, and white's rook simply can't deal with the passed pawns protected by black's king. That, however, wasn't the last blunder of the game. Here all black had to do was keep pushing this pawn with h2, and after rook g2, rook g1, it's time for white to resign if it wasn't already. Instead of that, they played king g2, going after this rook, but after king takes rook, king f2, then black's king is simply stuck in the corner, blocking the h-pawn, and white's king blocks the f-pawn, so all they have to do is push over here in order to promote and win. White missed this and blundered the game right back with rook h3. After king h3, king e2, king g2, white is up a pawn, but Brobmak Moment simply pushed this pawn in order to promote first and win the game. In the loser's bracket, we find Electric King 450 versus Tucker Josie. After 22 moves, this position was reached, and here Electric King is threatening mate on h7. However, Eli should have many ways to defend against this. One of them is h6, protected by the knight over here, or also h5. After h6 or h5 or even king g7, the engine thinks that black is better. Instead of that, they played here knight h6, and that's just a free knight. Actually, it's even worse than that, because now the only way to defend against mate is by taking this knight over here and giving white a full queen. Instead of that, Eli just allowed mate to happen and moved on to the next game. Their second game got pretty interesting right around here, where Electric King played knight d4, hitting the queen, and it may look like white can win a piece on d5 because he has two attackers versus one defender. However, after queen takes, bishop takes, then knight c2 happens and the rook in the corner is trapped. Now bishop e7, rook b8 hitting the bishop, and Eli should have played something like bishop c6 check or bishop e4, or even knight a3 where the rook can't take the bishop because of knight c2. But instead of that, they played b3, and now black is completely winning because Electric King should play rook b7, taking the bishop first. This rook isn't going anywhere because it's trapped in the corner, and so after they take the bishop, they can still take the rook. Now, they did the wrong move order here, and they took the rook first. Now the bishop can escape with bishop c6 check, for instance, like they did in the game, and Eli is out of the woods. Later during that game, Electric King played for tactics again with knight f3 check, taking advantage of the absolute pin on this pawn here that can't take the knight. However, this was a mistake, and after king h1, rook h8, what Electric King had probably calculated was pawn takes knight, rook takes bishop, which would actually be very favorable for black indeed, because white would get these doubled isolated pawns and also an isolated rook pawn, which means that these two rooks would be much too powerful. However, Eli found this move bishop f5 check, the only winning move in the position, and after the king moves, then pawn takes knight, and white is simply up a piece. Electric King resigned shortly afterwards. In the last game of the match, Eli with the black pieces was threatening the knight over here and the pawn. What the white should do here is play something like knight f3, giving back the pawn with a worse position, but it's still a game of chess. Instead of that, they castled and just lost the knight. Later in the game, Electric King blundered again by playing rook e5, and after queen a1 check, king h2, queen e5 check, forcing a trade of queens, Eli had sealed the deal and proceeded to win the game and the match shortly afterwards, moving on to the next round by eliminating Electric King from the event. The next match was the biggest upset of the tournament, with Detkan-Z eliminating seed number 2 of the event, Codeman 303. In the first game of the match, Codeman blundered by playing knight d4. Here, simply knight d4, e d4, queen d4 wins a pawn for white. Instead, Detkan-Z played knight e5, which also grabs a pawn and is very strong. And after queen a5 check, c3, queen takes knight, he should have played queen takes knight in order to protect the e-pawn. Instead, he recaptured with his own pawn. In this position, Codeman played a great move, bishop b4 check. Here, Detkan-Z had only one move, king e2. Instead, he played knight c3. And here there is a combination, knight c3 with the queens staring at each other when white's queen is undefended, unlike black's. So white has to take with queen g6. And after that, black doesn't simply recapture. Instead, they play knight a4, discovered check first so that their knight is safe, and only then recapture, so they are up a piece. Nothing of that nature happened, and instead Codeman castled here, losing the knight in the center of the board. The tactics didn't end there, and in this position, Detkan-Z played the top engine move, bishop h6, sacking the bishop for a very dangerous attack on black's king. Here, after pawn takes queen g3, Codeman should have been concerned about the threat of mate over here. He didn't do anything to stop that and got mated on the next move. Now, as you can see here, Detkan-Z had a pretty good run in the loser's bracket of the tournament. Only Tucker Josie, also known as Eli, was able to stop him. In the first game of their match, Eli took on e4, and here Detkan-Z should have recaptured with d4, but he probably didn't like the prospect of not being able to castle, which according to the computer was completely fine here. Instead, he played knight e5, blundering a piece, and Eli didn't let it slide. He played queen a5 check, and after taking the knight was completely winning. Later in the game, Eli formed a classic battery with queen and bishop, targeting the h2 pawn and threatening mate in 2 with queen h2, queen h1. However, neither player saw that, and Detkan-Z played knight b3, allowing the combination, but Eli stopped halfway through by castling here. The final blunder of the game happened when Detkan-Z took on c4, blundering a fork, and here he resigned. In the second game of the match, Detkan-Z blundered the center pawn by playing knight d4, and then played knight h6, blundering this classic fork of queen and rook. It didn't stop right there, however, and after knight takes rook, he tried knight c2 check, thinking probably that he had a double attack with this threat of mate over here and the threat of taking the rook over there. However, he missed the fact that the queen can defend against both by just taking the knight and protecting f2. The last blunder of the match happened when Detkan-Z played c6 here, attacking the knight and allowing queen h5 check with devastating effects. Here he should have played king f8, but was still lost after that. However, he played queen d7, allowing for mate in 2 with queen f7 check, followed by queen e7. However, in this position, he resigned. That concludes this part of the event. In the next and final video of the series on this tournament, I'll be talking about the finals. If you like this kind of content, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And also, if you want to talk with like-minded people and participate in these kinds of events, you can join our Discord. Link is in the description below. Bye!